Welcome to VB Coding. You can call me B. Today's video is going to be a continuation of our last VBA tutorial. Today we're going to go over a loop that'll allow us to work between all the sheets in a workbook. We're going to save each tab as their own workbook, and not only that, but save them within their own custom folder. If the folder does not exist, we will create it, and at the end, we will delete the sheets to clean up our macro for future use. So for looping between sheets, we are first going to define our variables that are going to count as the maximum, or the number of tabs within the workbook. That'll be our endpoint of when our loop will stop. And then we'll also keep a counter for tracking which sheet that we are currently selected on. So with our loop, we are going to do until the worksheet number that we want to select is equal to the number of sheets in the workbook plus 1, meaning it doesn't exist, and then you will get kicked out of the loop. For creating a folder, we are going to create variables to represent the full folder string as well as the sheet name, and we are going to check if the folder that we want to exist does exist. If not, then it is going to make that directory. If it does exist, then we are going to use the goTo method to escape from our if. And finally, for deleting our sheets, we are going to reset our counter for what sheet we are currently selected on. For our example, we are starting with sheet 3 because sheet 1 is going to be our cover, sheet 2 is going to be our master list, so sheet 3 is where our actual tabs start that we are going to be copying to workbooks and then deleting later on. Use the application.displayalerts equals false to turn off pop-ups, so that when we delete a worksheet, we don't want to have our macro be interrupted constantly with a pop-up saying, "Are you sure? Yes or no?" So you can turn those off, go through your loop, and then at the very end, do the application display alerts equals true to turn those back on. When we are deleting our sheets, we are first double checking, is the sheet name not equal to cover or not equal to lists? And that way you can do some extra checks and balances to make sure you don't accidentally delete a sheet that you don't mean to. If it meets your criteria, then do active window selected sheets delete, and then because we are deleting a sheet, our sheet counter will then be off. So when we delete a sheet, we are going to take that counter and do -1. So then at the bottom of your do until loop, when you do the worksheet select +1 to prepare for the next iteration of the loop, your sheet counter will not be off. And with that, let's hop right in. This video is going to be a continuation of our last VBA tutorial where we went over for each next and do until loop. You do not need to watch the previous video, but if you are wanting to copy this example from start to finish, then I do recommend watching that previous one. As a quick recap, the workbook that we are working in, we have a list of animals that were surrendered to our zoo, to our shelter, and our first macro organized all of this information where we had one tab per group. So we have one tab for geckos, another tab for bearded dragons, and one for snakes. For this video for today, we want to copy each sheet into its own workbook and save it into its own custom folder. So on our desktop, we have a animal rescue folder. In here, we have different folders for care, vendors, and surrenders. So we want to specify adding those workbooks into that surrenders folder. And not only that, but we will make a new subfolder per animal group. If there is not a folder for that animal group yet, the macro will create a new one. Otherwise, it'll use an existing one. On our cover sheet, compared to where we left off in the last video, I made a couple small edits. I entered a extra step for entering a date that the animal surrendered, and this will be key in naming our new workbooks. And then updating, this will be now step 3, and that's new step 4. And I also adjusted the button sizes. And to do that without left clicking would activate the macro. If you want to mess with the size, you right click to get the dots all around the button, and now you can adjust the size. So let's go to our developer tab, click on Visual Basic to open up our Visual Basic window, and we are going to make a new module. So go up to Insert, click on Module, because in VBA coding, our coding is saved in these modules. And I can go over here and rename it. We can call it Create Workbooks. So starting off our code, let's do sub create workbooks. Once I hit enter, it creates that end sub tab. I want to define my variables. So keeping all of your variables at the top, it just makes it easy to keeping organized. So the variables I'm creating, I'm doing dim, which means dimension, defining WS select or cell to mean worksheet selected. What is the current tab that I am on right now? Worksheet count, how many worksheets are in this workbook? S name to stand for the sheet name. Date S, standing for the date string coming from what the user inputs in B14. F name to represent file name, and animal folder to represent the, well, animal folder name. Easy peasy. So I'm going to define date S is going to come from what sheet? The cover sheet, from range. Actually, I need to update that. From B14. And we're grabbing the value from that range from that sheet. And you can double check to see what is the value that the macro thinks it is currently by using debug.print space and the variable name. You need the immediate window. So go up to view and select immediate window. So now press F8 to run your code line by line. So pressing F8, F8, and now when it printed that variable down in the immediate window, we can see it captured 2025 0603. And I can set or hit F8 again and it'll end. So as we want to work from sheet to sheet, we want to first note how many worksheets are in this workbook. So I'm going to say WS count, which is one of the variables that we made up earlier, equals active workbook.sheets.count. And now for our counter of what worksheet we are currently on, currently selected, I'll say WS select or cell equals 3. WS cell being one of the variables that we made up. If I change the name up here, I would change it down here as well. And I'm starting on sheet 3 because that is the first sheet that has our animal information that I want to copy over. Because the first tab is our cover sheet, the second one is our main list. So sheet 3 is where I'm actually going to get this started. So I'm going to say do until WS select the selected sheet that we are on. The number of the sheet that we're on. If it is beyond the total count of sheets, then stop the loop. At the end of our do until, we would do ws select equals ws select +1 loop. And now whatever we want to repeat, we would put in the section right here. So to grab the name of the sheets, I personally have some trouble using the evaluate method in VBA. So I'm going to show you my workaround that has worked for me. And I'm going to cheat a bit. So the way how I do this is go back to your developer tab, and we are going to record a quick macro. When you record a macro, it'll make a new module. So this is where you will find that coding. So somewhere off to the side, out of the way, past all of your information just to make sure I'm not overriding something, I'm just going to go to Q1. In Q1, I'm going to type in the formula, mid cell file name. I'll just say for cell Q1, it doesn't really matter. I want to find a closing bracket in the string. And cell file name. Q1. And what this formula is doing is basically pulling up the full file string for this workbook, which includes the folders that it is saved in, the workbook name, which is surrounded by brackets. At the end is the sheet name. So what this formula does is takes a whole string, it finds that closing bracket, and when it finds it, it goes over by one character and pulls in the rest of the string after that. So now I can stop this recording. And I only need it once. I'm keeping one golden copy of our coding. And so whatever the macro recorded is like our scratch work. So I'm going to copy this over. Within our do until, I also want to make sure I'm going to the correct worksheets. So worksheet selects to make sure we are clicked in the right one. And once we are in our current worksheet, this is where we can copy over our recording. So now that we have a cell within our tab that has the worksheet name, now we can say that variable that we defined before, the sheet name or S name, is going to be that Q1 value. For the file name that we are going to name this later on, it is going to be date S, which we defined all the way up here, coming from our cover sheets. And we are going to glue that to our S name. And to quickly make sure everything looks right, let's do our debug print for F name. And I can close that. Get our immediate window back open. And just for our testing, I'm going to undo what I did there. Pressing F8, F8, F8. I still have that debug print turned on for our date string. I know I don't need this anymore, so I'm going to put a apostrophe at the beginning, and that will comment out that line. You'll see the text turn green. So continuing on, pressing F8, F8. Our worksheets. The worksheet that we want to be currently selected on was 3, so it went to the Gecko tab. Selecting in Q1, putting in our formula, defining our sheet name and our file name, send out debug.print file name. This is what we're going to be using very soon. And it looks correct, it looks nice. And I don't need to continue on from here during our testing, so I can just hit that stop button, that blue square at the top. So you see that yellow bar disappeared. We are no longer running the macro. So that file name looks right, so I can put the apostrophe in to comment out that debug print. I do not need it anymore. So we can also put in descriptions to say finding the name of the sheet to use in new workbook name. I can tab this over to show this is for this group. So next up, we are going to define the animal folder. So where I'm going to be getting this from, if I move this out of the way, I have this animal rescue folder. So I want my information to be going into the surrenders subfolder. And I can click in this white bar and it'll show the full file path. So I can Control C to copy that path and go back into our macro. The animal folder is going to be that string and quotation marks. I'll put a backslash before the ending quotation marks, and I want to put a ampersand s name. So we can do our debug print animal folder to make sure that this whole string looks okay. So pressing F8, F8. And here's the entire folder path that I want the information to go to. But there's just one thing. The Gecko subfolder does not exist right now. So we need to make this. And seeing that this string looks good, I can actually comment out that debug print. I do not need it anymore. So next, I want to create folder if it does not exist. So for this piece, I'll say if directory, or dir, animal folder, what we just defined up here, comma, VeeBee directory, does not equal nothing, meaning it does exist, then I can just skip this part. So I'll just say go to skip creates. Else, I want to make the new directory, mkdir, animal folder, and I need to close off my if, so I'll just say end if. And below here, I want to type in, this has to have a place to go. So I'm going to do the same, skip create, end it with a colon, hit enter. And when you hit enter, it'll automatically go to the left. So let's run this macro again. I'm going to have this folder open so we can watch it. And instead of pressing F8 again and again, I left clicked this gray bar over here to put in a stop. So now I can hit this green play button and it'll run all the way until here. And now from here, I can left click again to take off that stop and press F8 to manually execute myself. So pressing F8, and already we see it skipped this line because it found that this animal folder does not exist. And when we execute that make directory, we now see a new gecko subfolder. And if sure, let's just click on or keep on clicking. Going on to the bearded dragon, we can see this workbook updating to the left. And noted bearded dragon, animal subfolder. It's checking to see if it exists. It does not, so it's going to make a new directory for that animal folder. We now have a bearded dragon subfolder. And I can keep pressing F8 again, or I can press this play button. It finished running, and we have a new snake subfolder. But right now they're empty. So let's work on the next step of creating a copy of the sheets and saving them in our new folder locations. So let's say create copy of sheet and save in our new location. So we are still working within our do until loop. So we are still working on whatever sheet that we are selected. So I can say sheets, WS select, whatever cell, whatever sheet that we are on. I'm just selecting it one more time to be extra safe. I'm going to copy it. And now this is where we are going to, instead of using make directory, we are going to change the directory. An easy way to do this, a bit of code, if you want to, go back to your record macro button. Let's record. And right click on the tab name, click on move or copy. For the to book dropdown, click on new book, check create a copy, and OK. It is making a new workbook. So now we can save as. On our desktop, where we have our animal rescue, our surrenders folder, gecko, and just as a placeholder, I'm going to change this. I'm just calling it my gecko workbook, closing it, and now we're back to our original macro. But we need to clean this up a little bit. So we're still going to keep, we selected the sheet, we copied it, we're using change directory. We're saving it to a new location. But for this piece, we need to change this, and we need to change the name that we are saving this as. Let's copy over our change directory. So it's going to our animal folder. And for the save as file name, we are going to use fname. And when that workbook is saved, we want it to close, so then we come back to our macro. So now let's test this out. So back in our macro, pressing F8, F8. This is fine. The gecko subfolder already exists. So this time when I press F8, it is going to let go to skip create, execute. So when it says go to skip create, it went down to here, and now we are moving on to selecting on that tab again, copying it, saving it to the animal folder, or changing directory to that animal folder, save as with that file name, and close. So when I pressed F8 again, it continued to run for the remaining animals. So let's go back in here and see how things turned out. Going to our gecko subfolder, we have our gecko workbook. Using the date and time that we purposefully put on the cover sheet, named after the gecko tab. So now if I open up this workbook, it is just the geckos. One more thing is, if in the workbook you don't want to keep your little scratch work on the side in Q1, I can go back in here and in our copy, I can say range Q1 clear contents. Let's test that again. I'm actually going to delete all of those. It will not let me delete the snake for some reason, but that's okay, no worries. I just left clicked on here to put in a stop. I'm going to hit the green play button to make it all the way down to here. So we are now going to be working in the geckos. Copy. In Q1, clear contents. And because we are selected all the way over here, I can actually put it in range A1.select. Left click the yellow arrow and drag it up, so then I can re-execute coding. Press that A1. Now finish saving our workbook. And I'm going to hit the stop button at the top, go into our gecko, confirming I no longer see our scratch work on the corner. And there you go. But going back to tying everything together, first off, we can remove the module that had our just rough recording. We don't need that. From the workbook, from the module that we were just working in, I'm going to grab that name we put at the top, create workbooks, and go back into our original macro that we wrote in the last video. And at the bottom, I can say I'll create workbooks, and I'll actually move that message from before. And this message box is very simple. It's just going to make a little pop-up that says macro has finished running, with the title box being complete. Well, with the title being complete. At this point, we have saved all of our sheets for our animals into their own workbooks within our surrender subfolder. Well, let's clean this workbook up a bit more. So we have copied down some of the breaks, and let's call this section removing animal tabs. I'm going to start with the worksheet that I want selected to be sheet 3. And just to get started, being selected on that sheet, we will do until the worksheet that we are selected on. So we want to keep going until there's no more sheets to select. So we're taking the count of worksheets in the workbook and doing +1. So if we try to select sheet 5, but the workbook only has 4 sheets, then our do until loop will end. So our do until loop will end with WS select +1 to move on to the next tab, loop. And then whatever we want to happen, we will put in the middle here. So we are going to say if sname doesn't equal cover, or sname or sheet name doesn't equal list, then we will take the active worksheet, active selected sheets, and delete it. And honestly, because we were starting at sheet 3, I don't need to do this quick sname check to see if it's the cover or list, because we didn't do this Q1 on the cover or list tabs anyway. But just to include this section in case this is important for your own future projects, it's good to have, you know, some checks in there. And then we do similar to when we work on do until loops to remove or insert rows. That'll make our sheet count get off. So because I deleted a sheet, I don't want to go to our next line down below to do current sheet +1. So I'm going to do current sheet selected equals that number -1 before we do our end if. And because we are changing the count of sheets with each iteration, when each time we delete a sheet going through this loop, the worksheet count changes. So I'm going to say that worksheet count active workbook sheets count, just to give it a fresh start, because if I don't do this, if I don't recalculate it, it's going to think the workbook still has 5 sheets, even though we just deleted 1. And this is going to be handy because if I did not keep up with this, then the do until will not end the loop when it really should have. So now if I go to delete a tab, a pop-up window is going to appear to say, are you sure? Yes or no. These pop-up windows stop the macro from running, and they want you to select, yes or no. It wants your input. So to not slow down my macro, I'm going to say outside of my do until loop, application, display alerts equals false to turn them off. And then after my loop, I'm going to copy paste it and say true to turn those back on. And then at the end of my macro, I like to go back to our cover sheet and select somewhere, A1, just to get back to the top, or get back to the top at the start. And always save your workbook. At the end of our original coding, where we organize the sheets, we have our call for the create workbooks macro. So now just clicking on organize animals is going to run both of those modules. So I'm just deleting those tabs so we can do a fresh run. So on our cover sheet, just for the sake of showing that it is taking in what I'm inserting on B14, I just changed the date there. And now let's click on Organize Animals. I had a typo. So I corrected selected, it needs a ED, and now I can continue to press play. Complete, macro has finished running. So all of those extra animal tabs are now gone. Going back to our surrenders workbook. 2025-06-04, using the new corrected date. Gecko and snake. And now, in your facility, whoever is going to be looking at these workbooks, they can rename these, move them to another folder to say, they finished looking at the folder or looking at the file. Whatever they want to do, it's up to them now. You did your work. Now it's time for their turn. And there you have it. We have gone through creating individual taking the individual tabs, making them into their own workbooks. We saved them in their own custom subfolder. And if the subfolder did not exist already, we created those. And there you have it. So because we did have to do a quick adjustment right there with a typo, let's actually run this macro again, and I'll give it a new date, because otherwise, if I run this again now with the same date, the workbooks will have the same name, and it'll ask you to override. So saving everything again. And I'll just be selected in one of our animal folders. Click on Organize Animals. It made all the tabs. It's making all the workbooks for each of those animal tabs. And we got our confirmation. The macro has finished running. It is complete. We can see in our Gecko subfolder we have a new file with the new dates. And this is great because you can keep changing this. You can keep running this macro over and over. And it'll get everything done for you. Thank you so much for watching. If you have a scenario in mind, feel free to email me at askvbcoding@gmail.com and I'll consider them for future videos. I really appreciate your time and thank you again for watching. Have an awesome night. Goodbye!